Hello and welcome back. I'm a week away from starting my new job, so I probably won't have much time to make more videos in the future, so I'm going to make one now while I can. And today, I have some of the clutchest moments in chess history. I have 6 great swindles lined up today, and there's a part 2 coming with 7 more. So let's get into the first swindle. Frank Marshall was an American chess player in the early 20th century. He was one of the best players in the world at the time, and he was famous for getting draws or even wins from losing positions. This is probably the most famous Marshall swindle. Here he has the white pieces. He's playing Georg Marko. I don't actually know how to pronounce that. And he is losing because this pawn on b3 is just going to make a queen, unless white does something drastic. So here Marshall tries pawn to c6. This, I thought it threatened checkmate. It doesn't because of the bishop all the way here on c3. But there are still some threats that black has to deal with. Now the best move for black was not bishop takes c6, but rather b takes c6 with the lowercase b. And then white would play rook takes b7, king to b8, and then rook to b7. You have to take, and then knight to c5, king goes somewhere, and then you take the rook, and I think black avoided this, or rather I took this in most of the games here from the Wikipedia article about swindles in chess, and the article says that black avoided this line because now this pawn is temporarily stopped. But black can play bishop to d4 and slowly march over and win this knight because it has no moves, and then the pawn will promote. You do have to be a little careful about the 2 pawns for white, but as you can see from the evaluation bar, this is completely winning for black. But c6 was a tricky move, and Marko tried to defend the c7 square by playing bishop to e5. And Stockfish now says it's draw, and white plays c takes b7, check. You should not take because of this fork. And so in the game, king to b8 was played, and now knight to c5, threatening the rook on a4. Black played rook a2 check. White moved the king, and black played b2. He's ready to make a queen. It would be great if white could play rook h8, but the bishop is defending that. So white played rook e7, attacking the bishop and threatening the same idea. So black sidesteps that idea by playing king to a7. If black had queened immediately, white would have rook e8, king a7, rook a8 check, king to b6, b8 queen, king takes knight, queen takes queen, and after rook takes a8. This is far from trivial, but white should win this position. Marko saw that, so he avoided it. He played king a7, and now it looks like this pawn is just going to promote. So white needs to play rook to e8 and set up that threat again. So black still cannot make a queen. He plays pawn to c6, which defends the b8 square. White plays rook a8 anyway. Black plays king to b6, the only legal move, and white grabs a rook, but black can promote. Now here it looks like black is completely winning if you don't see the evaluation bar. And of course when you are actually playing a game, you don't see the evaluation bar. And black is up a queen for a rook and a couple of pawns. And so white clearly needs to take some sort of immediate action to get back in the game. And the brilliant move for Frank Marshall is b8 queen, skewering the king and the queen. But black can just take that, right? Well, now rook to b2, forking the king and the queen. Well, black can just take that too, right? Yes, and he has to. But now there's knight to a4, forking the king and queen again. And you cannot take this time. Black plays king to b5, white takes the queen. This position is still a draw according to Stockfish, and if you head over to the table base, it shows you that this is a draw after most potential moves by black. And here, if anyone's going to win this game, though, it is white. White has these two kingside pawns that are pretty far from this king and could be a problem if they advance together. Black is definitely not going to win. White can just sacrifice the knight for the pawn if need be. Black is not going to beat anybody with just a bishop. And in the game, Marco eventually threw, and Marshall went on to win from this position. And now on to comeback number 2. This one is, this time it's black making a big comeback. It is Sergei Dolmatov against Ivanov, whose first name is not given. Black is down a rook for a bishop and a pawn, and his bishop is under attack. He is clearly losing this game. Stockfish says it is +3, a clearly winning advantage for white. Black plays pawn to e3, setting up a trap, and white falls for it hook, line, and sinker and plays rook takes b4. And black plays e2. Now the white king is boxed in, and this pawn desperately needs to be stopped. White plays rook to e4, and black plays bishop takes bishop, and then after pawn takes bishop, you get h4, which cannot be taken because the pawn would promote with checkmate, and this prevents white from playing h4 and freeing the king. So with the white king boxed in and the rook constantly needing to patrol the e1 square, this game is a draw despite white being up almost an entire rook because there is a fortress. And now on to swindle number 3. This is one of the most interesting ones. In this position, black has a 4-point material lead. He is up a knight and a pawn in basically an endgame, and white seems to be basically dead lost despite having this active king and rooks that maybe could get to the back rank if something is captured. In this position, black played the move pawn to d4, which is already a mistake according to Stockfish, which says the game is a draw. But how is it a draw with this much extra material for black? White played the incredible move rook d to d3. Both rooks are hanging, but you cannot take either of them because if you do, the other rook has a clear line to the back rank where it will deliver a checkmate. Black has to play. What does black have to play? Black had to play b3, and then white would have to sacrifice the rook again. black would take, white would take the knight, and black would have to play rook to d8, avoiding checkmate. White would have to play rook takes b3, and after some more only moves, the game would end in a draw by repetition. None of that happened, and none of that happened. And black played knight to b5, and white is now winning after rook takes e4. Black plays knight e6, the top engine move. White finds rook e6, the only move, and the evaluation has gone from -2.5 to +3 and then some. It said plus pi at one point. And after rook to c6, white finds the only move that is definitely... Oh. White actually doesn't. Rook h3 is given as the only winning move by Stockfish, but in the game white played rook to d4, and even Stockfish is a little confused here. The threat is obviously to take the knight and remove the defense of the e8 square. And apparently black in desperation played rook takes h6. These are the moves I've been given. I did double check to make sure that that is actually what the source said, and that is apparently what was played. King takes h6, knight takes f5 check, king to g6, and black resigned here. And now on to clutch moment number 4. This one was played between two players who were not that well known, William Fuller and Leonid Basin in Detroit, I believe. And this is, according to Stockfish, a more dead-lost position than any of the other positions that people have come back from in this video. Yes, white has a rook for a bishop, but black has 1, 2, 3, and 4 extra pawns, and 2 of them are passed pawns. Not only that, they are connected passed pawns, and they are going to make a queen. White does not have enough pieces to defend, or does he? Fuller plays rook to f8 check, and black plays king h7. White plays queen to f2, and this sets a trap. Usually when you are up material, you want to trade queens, and indeed if this and this, black is completely winning. Black falls for the trap and plays queen takes f2, and white plays rook to h8, and in this position the players agreed to a draw because the only legal move for white is to take the rook and stalemate white. Did I say the only legal move for white? I meant the only legal move for black. And as for what black could have done instead of queen takes f2, black could have gone here. That is the top move of Stockfish. And queen takes h3 also wins. But ultimately, in the actual game, there was a stalemate. Now, on to swindle number 5. This one happened in the U.S. Chess Championship. The game was between Nick DeFermian and Kamran Shirazi. And in this position, white is not all that winning despite having 3 extra pawns. The Stockfish evaluation is only 1.2, which is sort of in the border region between winning and drawn, but the way that Shirazi comes back is so incredible that I had to include it. The first move is not that incredible. He plays queen g6, which attacks this rook, and also puts the queen in an active position where it can look to attack the king. White takes a fourth extra pawn with rook takes b5, but this actually throws away all the advantage. The engine says white had to play rook b2 and respond to rook e8 with bishop to d2 and still be marginally winning. But in the game, after rook takes b5, Shirazi played rook takes f2, threatening checkmate in one move, and white needed to play g4. Apparently that is a very unnatural move for a human to play. It looks like it opens up the king when the king is at his most vulnerable, but after queen to c2, queen e8, you can get what looks like a draw by repetition. In some lines it does end in a draw by repetition, but here the black pieces are just not active enough to deliver mate, but still active enough that white is not winning even with 3 extra pawns. But in the game, white blunders with queen a8 check, which is a more human move than g4, and black plays rook back to f8. Now the queen is under attack. If the queen releases the pin, unless she goes there and loses, if the queen moves somewhere that releases the pin and it's not here, then it will be checkmate for black. If the queen goes here, obviously you just take the queen. So white really has only one option, and that is to counterattack the black queen with rook to g5. And now black plays a truly remarkable move, queen to e4, sacrificing the queen on an empty square. The point is, the queen is attacked. If queen takes queen, the rook is no longer pinned, so rook f1 is checkmate. So in this position, de Fermion resigned, and Shirazi completed one of the most impressive comebacks in chess history. And finally, no video on the greatest chess swindles would be complete without including this game, also from the US Championships. With the white pieces, we have Grandmaster Larry Evans, and with the black pieces, Grandmaster Samuel Reshevsky, who is up a knight for a pawn. He is completely winning, as you can tell by this evaluation bar. Evans, in this position, plays h4, setting a trap. Black plays rook to e2, which is quite a natural move. Sorry, there is construction outside, and it is very loud, so I don't know if you will be able to hear me that well. But white plays king h1, king to g1 would have blundered a checkmate. And according to Stockfish, only rook e1 check and queen g6 win for black. Black thinks he's getting another free pawn and plays queen takes g3 and blunders a draw. White had foreseen and set up a beautiful and clever stalemate trap that starts by sacrificing the queen with queen to g8. And if it is not taken, there will be checkmate, so white must take it, and then white plays rook takes g7 check, and the players agree to a draw because if the rook is captured, it is stalemate, and if the rook is not captured, it will just keep checking the king, and it can never be taken without stalemate. Many people have called this game the greatest swindle of all time, the swindle of the century, the mother of all swindles, things like that. And it's hard for me to disagree. The stakes were high. It was the national championship of the U.S., and Evans pulled this off against a top Grandmaster player. And just the idea of giving away every piece is very appealing to chess players when it works. Not very appealing when you're just so tired or so flustered that you lose every piece in like 5 pieces in a row and you end up losing the game. But it is always very satisfying when you get to give away all your pieces and it works. And that is exactly what happened here. And I'll see you for part 2. Thank you for watching.